Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us, as Melissa said, for our weekly press briefing. As you're all aware, the discussion or the order of the day is certainly water. First and foremost, let me take an opportunity before I get in the updates to thank all of the many individuals, corporations, churches, cities, the list goes on and on and on, who have been generous with their resources, generous with their time, who have prioritized and demonstrated love for the residents of Jackson. I think we need to always start with that positive impression of what is going on. When we are at our worst, or when the circumstances are at their worst, that is when people are at their best. And so we want to thank them for all of their support. As you know, there's ongoing work at the water treatment facility to make sure that pressure remains stable. We are happy to report that all Jackson residents should have experienced normal pressure at this point. I leave that with the caveat that there may be some individual homes or businesses that may have an issue that needs to be resolved at that point or at that location. Some, for instance, Forest Hill High School, it is believed that they have a valve that becomes complicated when water pressure ceases, it has to be remediated at that site. And so I know that both JPS and our Public Works Department is working diligently to resolve that issue, and hopefully, prayerfully, the students can return back to that location. O.B. Curtis remained at a steady pressure over the past 24 hours and is currently operating at 86 PSI, that's pounds per square inch. The margin of storage that was built over the last weekend has decreased some over the past 24 hours. We are currently producing stable pressure, but if a challenge arises with the plant operations today, it will likely impact customers. This is part and parcel of what we've experienced at this very fragile water treatment facility. And so we're prayerful that there is no major interruption or crisis that occurs today, because the safety net, if you will, that has been built up has decreased and is diminished. And so that is why we're prayerful that everything remains consistent and that we don't see any challenges there. I want to let residents know if you are experiencing discoloration in your water or no water pressure, there is a reporting tool for the city's website, on the city's website, to report these factors. This is helpful to us to not only respond to you, but to get a better picture of what's happening with the system overall. And so I encourage people to go to the city's website once again. That is www.jacksonms.gov. And please search for the reporting tool on the website that will enable you to report such issues. Work continues at the plant today on both the membrane and conventional systems with city staff, the mutual aid teams from Mississippi, Georgia, and the Rural Water Association. This is important because, as we've talked about the success that has been gained, it's important to know how that has happened. This has happened because we've had a number of professionals to come from around the regional area. To be honest, the bench is short in Mississippi. The bench of professionals that know how to operate a surface water treatment facility, that know how to operate both a conventional system and a membrane system is very rare. And so to have these experts that have come from other states has aided this recovery effort. And while we do see return pressure for most of our residents, if not all of our residents, and we anticipate that the testing, first of all, sampling has begun in terms of investigatory sampling, so they would know a general time frame in terms of when they can do the official sampling through the health department. which requires 2 days before a boil water notice can be lifted. We've been here before is where I'm going. The city of Jackson has restored its pressure before. We've lifted boil water notices before. But I think that it is critical that we don't drop a mission accomplished banner just yet, because the condition is still as we've said it is. That it's not a matter of if these systems will fail again, but when these systems will fail again if we don't have permanent fixes in place. Our stopgap measures will not be sufficient. There are more repairs that are taking place on a permanent level than has happened before, but there is still a significant road ahead. And so for those that are carrying this story, I want to lift that up. For the residents of Jackson who have been enduring this challenge, I want to speak honestly to you, instead of providing some false hope that we are in the clear and that there are no more problems to contend with. We believe that if everyone stays together, if that we work on a common or on one sheet of music, then the likelihood that we can overcome these challenges is probably greater than it's ever been before. But the challenges still exist nonetheless, and so we need to communicate that. I want to take the opportunity to tell the men and women, both those who work for the city of Jackson and those who are visiting from other locations, how much we appreciate their work, how much gratitude we have for their willingness to offer their gifts and abilities to us. And as I've heard morale, as certain things have improved, has increased, I want to encourage them and let them know, at least from the city standpoint, we will continue to be working in conjunction with them, that we will be a part of the team, right, not only now, but moving forward. I want to speak to another issue that I think is important to lift up, and that is the issue of unity, not division. When we talk about the challenges that the residents are suffering from, I likened it to, the nation when we have political strife in the midst of a war. Typically, we understand that it is imperative that we put our political differences aside to contend with the challenge that we all face. And when we look at the lack of water in the city of Jackson, when we look at the humiliation that our residents have suffered from, I think that this is an important time to focus on that unity and not that division. That is why I have consistently avoided opportunities to take shots. That is why I have consistently spoken of that is not the priority of today. And that is what I want to communicate and reiterate again. I think that when residents are suffering at the hands of the challenges that we've seen, and they see us at a press conference together, and in that press conference we say that we're going to work together. We say that this is a unified effort, right? And not more than a week later, we're taking shots. Then what that fundamentally does to the residents of Jackson is that it leaves them less resolved or less confident that we're actually going to be able to fix these problems. And so that is why it is important that I remain, that our administration remains, that the city, that the state, that everyone who is putting their hands into the dirt to fix this problem remain focused on the problem itself and not our differences. And so I want to speak to that. We will continue to work with a coalition of the willing. We will continue to work with all of those who are well-intentioned to serve the residents of Jackson. Right? And we have to make certain that we understand that that is the primary focus at this time. And the residents don't really care about what we feel about each other when there's not water coming out the tap. The residents don't really care, whether you're Democrat or Republican, when they have to interrupt their day in order to go get water in order to serve their basic needs. And so I think that there's plenty of time to discuss the facts, to litigate our case, if you will. And I'm sure a lot of that is going to go on. But I want to return to the call of unity. I want to return to the call of us working in conjunction with each other and not taking those shots. I do believe that there are some matters that we do have to make clear so that people understand where their city has been and what efforts we have made. I know that a good part of this story or the narrative has been the lack of a plan for the city, right? People have asked questions, the media have asked questions about that. And we've shared that we've had many, many plans. We shared where we're going, and I think it's imperative that we communicate that, where we're going with our plan and who's at the table. And to that extent, I want to share a few materials with you so you know, and I know that you'll do your public records request, some things we can provide. The first document that I have is the city's commissioned strategic capital improvement plan. This informed the subsequent request for funding that you see at the water treatment facility. This was actually commissioned, I believe, somewhere around 2018, 2019. And you had AJA Management, Neil Schaefer, Soul Engineering, that went through an exhaustive list of all of the city's critical infrastructure needs at the water treatment facility, wastewater treatment facility, and the like. And so I want to first point to that. The next thing that informed a lot of the data and a lot of the information that we gave was what they call the SERP, right? The SERP is a list of critical repairs that the EPA has identified and a schedule of implementation. And so this came out of the agreed order of consent between the EPA and the city of Jackson. At the time that we reached this agreement, one of the things that we primarily lifted it up, and we've only been under this for, somewhere around the neighborhood of a year, right? Is that we needed flexibility in terms of the implementation of the requirements in the SERP. And the reason we needed that is because we know better than anyone our circumstance and condition with the city. We know better than anybody our financial condition, and that is why from the very start we said that we needed flexibility in these timelines, and they assured us that they would provide that, right? The next thing is a plan that was submitted to the Hinds County Legislative Delegation. You will find a detailed PowerPoint that speaks to the needs, that outlines all of the repairs that were immediately identified at O.B. Curtis to the tune of $20 million just on this particular list. It talks about membrane resurfacing, HVAC systems, repair leaks at conventional filters. It talks about the pumps. It talks about many of the things that you have become familiar with over the last few days that we have acknowledged and have shared that needed to be done. And it also has a projected cost next to it. This was given to our delegation. In addition to that, we have about $15,600,000 that was given with JH Fuel, all a part of this same presentation that outlines what needs to be repaired and what the costs are. We've also given them a list of the water distribution system priorities. That means the pipes that are in each precinct across the city. For Precinct 1, the estimated cost was $11,300,000. For Precinct 2, about $300,000. For Precinct 3, $7,300,000. And for Precinct 4, approximately the same as Precinct 3. And so these are the things that we talked about. We also put in here things like our sewage system challenges that you're well aware of. And so I want to be clear that we have endeavored to communicate, right? Now, we are willing to accept that if the effort of communication that is asked for is not sufficient in order to meet those legislative requests, then we are malleable. We are able to be instructed of what is most helpful. In fact, when we presented that plan, one of the things that our legislators said is that, we need a better picture of what the city is giving towards its ARPA funds and what specifically are you asking of the state through it, right? So out of that same PowerPoint document, that more extensive document that I had, they asked for a one-pager, and so we provided a one-pager, right? That one-pager, and I wasn't clear, let's see the last document. This was provided after meeting about 4 times in between October of 2021 until December of 2021. And we met approximately 4 times over that span to sit down and meet and discuss what those priorities and requests were. And this is the one-pager that was asked for to make it easier to talk about those requests. The next thing is a letter that was written by me to the governor about our critical needs. And I'm going to take a moment to read this letter to you. And this came on the heels or right after dealing with our freeze of 2020. Dear Governor Reeves, on February 12, 2021, I issued a proclamation declaring a civil emergency for the city of Jackson in anticipation of severe weather. As you are aware, the extreme weather conditions that occurred severely compromised our ability to produce and distribute water at our O.B. Curtis and Fuel water treatment plants, depriving residents and businesses of water. 19 days later, we are still in recovery. We appreciate your deployment of the National Guard to assist in the distribution of non-potable water to Jackson residents. However, this disaster, along with the winter freeze of 2018, has emphasized the critical need for immediate repairs and improvements to our water distribution system. We can no longer afford to wait on funds to repair and improve our aging infrastructure. We need funding assistance from state and federal agencies now. Accordingly, I am requesting emergency funding from the state and federal government to make capital improvements necessary for the efficient operation of Jackson's water treatment plants and distribution network. These improvements are critical to the efforts to ensure that our residents and businesses are not deprived of clean water again. I have attached a list of needed improvements for our plant and distribution lines with an estimated cost of approximately $47 million. Your assistance in obtaining the funds to complete these projects will be greatly appreciated. Thank you for your consideration. And as I said, well, first and foremost, this letter was CC'd to the Lieutenant Governor, the Speaker of the House, the Hinds County delegation, Congressman Benny Thompson, Senator Wicker, and Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith. And then what followed is an exhaustive list of those repairs that were necessary. We've talked about the city and its plan for recruitment and recognizing that there is that short bench that I spoke to you about earlier when I said that you just don't have a lot of people who have the qualifications within the Jackson area, and those that do often work for private firms that it is difficult for us to compete with. And so we asked our our city engineer at the time to produce a recruitment and retention policy for our water treatment plants, which was passed by the council or was presented on the council agenda in November of 2021. And it talks about, steps and possible salary improvements to make ourselves more competitive. And we have worked to that effort. And then I also shared with you that we had some additional partners at the table. I talked about how the Kellogg Foundation was supporting us by paying for the support of the U.S. Water Alliance, and how they had a water engineer with, I think, more than 30 years of experience in water, and a team of engineers that were helping us prioritize what they saw as the immediate priorities of the plant, looking at all of the plans that I showed you, all of the lists that I showed you. And so here is a draft of their document going forward that talks about the various sites and issues that they have, that goes through and takes pictures of where these concerns are. I do want to make it clear that this is not a completed document, but it is the work that is underway and the fact that I told you that we would be sharing this with you. I can also share with you that we have added additional members to our team, or are adding. We're in the process of working with a third-party nonprofit to help fund their support, but we're looking at the expertise of another water engineer and people who have dealt with emergencies that are well known nationally. And I don't want to speak to them until that agreement is reached, but I will let you know that this is a well-informed, a well-experienced team, so that we make certain that the city of Jackson not only is asking for all of the things that we need. I told him that, you know, we don't need the things that we ask for. We need the things that we want. We don't want to be funded for the things that we ask for. We want to be funded for the things that we need, whether we know to ask for it or not, right? And so this team helps support those requests, help give information to us. I want to have the benefit of a water engineer that as this work is going on, they can explain to a layperson what it is helping ultimately and whether there are additional requests that we need to make. And so, you know, I wanted to present that because there's been a lot of discussion about what we have and have not communicated. But like I said, I think that the thing that we should leave this discussion with is a resolve to work together, right? Is a resolve that the people of Jackson are worthy of our collaboration. The people of Jackson don't care about our differences. And it is important that we demonstrate love and do something that, quite honestly, so many administrations have failed to do over the time, whether you're talking about the city or the state. And that is to fix a problem that has been plaguing our residents for decades. I believe we can do it, and I stand ready to work with anybody willing to work with me. With that, I'll open it up for any questions that you have. Yes, sir.
Mayor, what are the barriers that go into place right now that are preventing the city from going forward on any of these plans, and especially if it's something other than just financial barriers?
Well, it's primarily financial, and identifying where those resources can come. Now, some of the things that are in those documents have been funded either through SRF loans that we've taken out, right? Meaning that the city's taken out loans that it's low interest, but loans that we're going to have to pay back, right? You know, we talked about weatherization, or it was stated that we needed to weatherize. We've been working on weatherization for more than 3 years, right? In fact, if you haven't been to the water treatment facility before this year, you wouldn't know that the big white structure, the big white building that's down there didn't exist before. That was an exposed membrane side of our plant, right? And so part of the process of weatherizing is creating the structures that better protect the sensitive equipment from the elements, right? And so some of these things are already underway, but as it's been stated, where we need to go is so much further than where we are. And we have to make certain that we don't, you know, as we're working from A to Z, that we don't stop somewhere in the middle, right? And so that's what we need, you know. Now, if there's more technical expertise that needs to be at the table, we're open to that. We talked about operations and maintenance. We talked about our challenges with staffing. I shared with you that we had been in discussion with a corporation about taking over an operations and maintenance contract. And I don't remember which one of you asked me the question, but what I really delayed telling you is that that conversation stopped because they picked it up with the state, right? And so we've been unable to reach an agreement with them because we're no longer at the table to talk about what that agreement would look like. And so if there is some unity in thinking that this company is sufficient in order to operate the City of Jackson's water treatment facility, then there should be no barrier between our ability to let the city do that, right? Let the city make that agreement because we're talking about the same company. The only difference would be how the profits are distributed into priorities for the city. That would be the only difference, is in who makes that decision. And we believe that it needs to be recommitted to the various infrastructure challenges, with the first priority being drinking water. Yes?
The governor also said yesterday that the city has been taking in record revenues and that the city has problems with its billing, that those two things speak to the city's lack of a priority on funding this themselves. How do you respond to that?
Well, once again, not trying to make it a tit for tat, but to provide accurate information, right? When we came into office as an administration, this was a challenge that the city was already under. Everybody knows about the Siemens water meters. Everybody knows about stranded water bills. Everybody knows about how the city has been challenged bringing in the amount of revenue that it needs. What have we done to that? Well, first and foremost, we filed a historic lawsuit that recovered money that, one, made sure that the city wasn't insolvent, because we had to put that money, and everybody asked about this, we had to put the lion's share of that money in terms of the funding that had to go towards our bond covenants. We have taken out money for repairs over the years, and there are accounts that we have to keep money in. And if we're not in compliance with those covenants, then what it makes our bonds is callable. It means the insurance company that insures all of our bonds can deny coverage to us, and all of our creditors can then say, pay me now. And that would have meant that the city would have been responsible for somewhere in the neighborhood of $300 million all at once, which we clearly don't have, right? Which we clearly can't pay, which would have meant an entire collapse of the services we provide to our residents, right? So we not only sued for that, but we reached agreements with companies like Sustainability Partners to do a full implementation of new meters, which is still underway, right? It's like asking somebody to give a certificate of completion on building a home where you're in the middle of still building it, right? They have remediated the billing challenges. They have created a new system and a new software. We didn't have off-the-shelf software for a lot of the process of our water metering system. And so we've had to do a deep dive to correct all of these measures, right? So yes, the governor is correct, but he isn't telling you anything that we don't know, anything that you don't know, anything that you hadn't asked us 1,000 times, that we hadn't reported on and given you significant information to update you on, right? But just as I wouldn't lay every challenge with the state and funding at the governor's feet, I think it would be unfair to lay all of that on this administration's hands. Now, we have the responsibility of fixing it, and we're working diligently to do that, right? I have never said that the governor and the governor alone was the reason that Jackson didn't get the funding that it needed. I just said that we needed collaboration on multiple levels. Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, are you saying you're taking issue with I guess, what the governor said, that the city doesn't have a plan, that the different documents that you just showed and that letter that you sent to the governor indicates that you do have a plan? Are you suggesting that the state has been unresponsive to the city's needs?
This is what I'm communicating, because I have to be careful in how I respond to this to make sure that everybody stays at the table. What I am communicating is merely the correspondence that has gone on, right? What I am communicating is the outline of the various projects that needed to be done. What I am communicating is the engineered assessments of what needed to be done and was provided, right? What I am communicating is the exhaustive list of the EPA that has shared all of the priorities that we then, so that we weren't only relying on Jackson's position of what needed to be done, but a federal agency and what their prioritization was. I'm grateful that the governor and the state is at the table now. I'm grateful for MEMA. I'm grateful for the Department of Health. I'm grateful for the EPA. I'm grateful for all of those people who are working diligently to make sure that we correct this issue, right? Now, has communication been as I desired it up until this point? I think you know the answer to that question. I've told you. No, it hasn't, right? But I'm trying to give optimism, and I'm trying to give room to land the plane for us to be able to work going forward. And so that's what I'm trying to do, and that's all I'm communicating. Yes, sir?
Last time you spoke to the governor last week. Have you spoken to the governor last week?
I have not spoken to the governor since our tour that many of you were at. I have talked to many department heads. I not only stay in contact with my public works director, but other state officials that give me updates. I've talked to federal officials that have given me updates. And so I've talked to a number of people who have firsthand knowledge as to where we are. And so I continue to do that. And I think that for the capital city, for the largest city in the state of Mississippi to succeed, it requires, whether we're talking about this challenge or the challenges that have yet to come, it requires the ongoing engagement and discussion with both myself and its leadership, to include the governor. That doesn't mean that we have to agree on everything, right? I think you can surmise that, and I'm wrapping up, I think you can surmise that Governor Bryant and I didn't agree on everything, right? But we were able to come together to deal with a very significant challenge with our city, and that was our school district. And so sometimes there may be an assessment that we're going to have to agree to disagree, right? But the discussion first and foremost has to take place. Yes, sir.
Just two really quick questions. One, are you making the documents you just shared publicly available? And then secondly, is there a timeline on the implementation of the new metering system?
Yes, there is. That has been communicated. I don't remember. Sometime at the end, sometime in 2023 is the expected completion of the metering system. Off the top of my head, I can't tell you that exact time, right? But March of 2023 is the estimated completion of the water metering system. We do have about 20 copies or so of the letter between myself to the governor. The other documents you certainly can do a request for, and we can get it to you. I mean, we don't generally have a problem, giving it to you, but it does become costly depending on the number of requests we get. So that's why I would ask that you do that request for it. But these are documents that are discoverable. Yes. Yes, sir.
Last question.
Of course, you said that the responses have been inadequate from the state. Can you tell us anything about the nature of those responses? What are state officials saying to you about these issues?
So, the facts are we hadn't gotten the resources we need. That's what I'll leave it at, right? Once again, I'm trying to be less of a finger pointer, right? And more of a communicator of how we work together. That's what I'm trying to be. The fact is that they're at the table now. The fact is that we have a grand opportunity before us in order to implement a system that the residents have been longing for and are deserving of. And so the letter, I never got a response to the letter, if you want to know, right? But we can move forward, and that's what I'm hoping for. I'm going to take this last one because I know he didn't have opportunity from 3.
Yeah, so just two quick questions. So
Now you overdoing it with 2. No, I'm messing.
Easy
Go.
question. So is the city open to having discussions about privatizing the water system? And also, is there a timeline on when you all will begin taking samples to live the water?
Yeah, so they're already doing investigatory samples, right? These aren't the official samples, so they get a picture of when's a good time so that we don't waste resources or time with the people going into the field in order to do those samples. And so that has already begun, those investigatory samples. I have not yet gotten a report of what those look like, and so that will probably determine when the official sampling process will begin. As you know, the Department of Health is already out there, so I'm sure that they're weighing in on that process. And what was your other question?
Is the city open to having discussions about privatizing the water system?
So let me say this. For most residents, I always use this analogy. Most people don't care how a watch works, they just want to be able to tell time. Most residents don't care who controls the system in a basic way, so long as the system works. However, right, I think that what we have to inform one another of is what are the implications of the decisions we make, right? There is extensive literature, there is extensive history of how cities have been compromised by the privatization or the pillaging of public resources and how it impacts the residents specifically. It impacts them in terms of the rate structure and how much they pay, sometimes making it unaffordable for people to live in this city. That is why I'm against privatization, right? Is extensive literature in terms of all of the money that cities use. The only thing that a city has a franchise or a monopoly on is water, right? Entergy takes the power, Atmos takes the gas, you have various companies that provide cable, right? So that is the only resources that we have to not only repair the lines of our water system, repair the water treatment facility for years to come, repair roads and bridges and all of the things that you expect for your city to execute, right? And so if you privatize, then what do you understand from a private company if it's privatization? And we have to understand the difference between privatization and an operations and maintenance agreement. Privatization is based on a company trying to identify how they can profit off of a city. They're not coming to be, benevolent, right? They're coming to make money, right? And so in their agreement, they're looking at where they make their profit margin. For the city, we're not interested in a profit margin. We're interested in success and to be able to execute all of the resources and all of the services that we have to do. And so that is why that is a dangerous thing to put on the table, is because of how it harms the residents in the long term. When we talk about state, and this is the last thing I'll say, when we talk about takeover, well, I just shared with you that the state doesn't have the capacity any more than the city does to operate the water treatment facility. And so what they will be looking to do is to contract with someone else. If we're already in a discussion with the same company that the state is in, then why not move forward with the city doing it so that we can make sure that all other things stay consistent? Thank y'all very much. I appreciate you.